All right, everyone. Welcome to Digital Conversations presented by Chat Funnels. I am your host, Billy Bateman, and today I'm joined by the great David Dulany. David, thanks for joining me.
I'm doing well, man. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited that we finally got you on, and we're going to talk about your book, The Sales Development Framework. Got my copy right here. If anybody hasn't read it and you're in sales development, I think you should pick it up, and you're bound to learn something out of it. But before we get into that, like for those that don't know David, like can you introduce yourself and Tenbound and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm here in Silicon Valley, and in the tech industry, a lot of companies have the sales development teams, right? They call them BDRs, SDRs, et cetera. And I was running sales development programs at a few tech companies. I went out on my own about 5 years ago and started Tenbound as a way to help with the performance of those teams. So, we write playbooks, we do training and consulting, and put on events. So, we run the sales development conference and do a ton of digital events now. This book came out of just working with those companies that were trying to figure out sales development and kind of putting in a framework to how to start those programs, run the programs, and everything that we've learned over the last few years. So it's been a great ride.
Awesome. And then, with Tenbound, you guys do a lot of great research. You present at conferences all the time. With the specialty in sales development, this is something I've always wondered. In tech, we have the sales development function, then like the AEs, they work hand in hand. And everyone, seems to think, hey, we got to start these guys off as SDRs or BDRs, and then the ones that are good move on up to an AE. And I've always wondered, like, do the skills really translate? Like, yeah, if you're good as an SDR, you might be good as an AE, but you might also just be great as an SDR. But everyone wants to get to that AE role because it usually pays more.
Yeah, that's
What
true.
are your, what are your thoughts on like why we pay more to the AEs? Because if the AEs don't have any appointments, like they're not going to close any deals. Like I've always wondered, like how can we make this more equal? Because you really need both.
Yeah, it's a really good question, man. I mean, and one of the reasons that we started Tenbound and put some serious research behind the sales development function was we just felt like it wasn't really being taken seriously enough,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of technology involved, like what you're doing, at your company, there wasn't sort of enough emphasis on, hey, how do you do this right? Like, what are the benchmarks and what are the, ways that top performing companies are doing it? So really, first and foremost, it's like, we got to take this seriously, because to your point, if the sales reps don't have anything on their calendar as far as new business meetings and the pipeline is lagging, then there's some kind of disconnect there. And that's where the SDR team can come in. And I mean, to your point, like it's kind of looked at as an entry level position. It's sort of an afterthought at a lot of companies, and a lot of companies it's sort of a hot potato position where one day the marketing manager is in charge of it, and then they leave or it goes off the rails, and now the sales manager is in charge of it, and
For sure.
who knows what's going on over there, and we just think, wow, I mean, with all this investment, like why would you not take it more seriously? And to your point, a lot of people get into it because it's sort of seen as like the dues paying position. You be an SDR for a while, and then you become an AE, you double your salary, you've got more prestige, at the company. And so they want to get out of the SDR job as quickly as possible and get promoted. And it is. I mean, for some people it works great. They come in, they learn to prospect, they learn to follow up on inbound leads, they learn the ins and outs of the company and the industry, and then they're really poised to become a breakout AE, right? For
Yeah.
some people, it doesn't translate as well because the SDR job is just one sliver of the overall AE job. And so you could be really good as an SDR, but then you fail as an AE. So we see that happen a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's a tough role. Like there is, just dialing and emailing all day. Like there's a lot of rejections. So I really got a lot of respect for anybody that's doing this or leading a team and has done it for a long time and done it well, because I don't think it's easy. I think it's a pretty
Yeah.
challenging position that probably doesn't get enough respect, in my opinion.
100%. And it's hard to find a great SDR. And there's not a lot of people that want to stay in the position for a long time and just
Yeah.
continuously crank. Like as a business owner and, somebody who's looking at it from a strategic perspective, I would love to have an SDR who just cranked, year after year and was always filling the pipeline with qualified meetings. But the way that it's set up right now, that doesn't happen a lot. I mean, to your point, it's a really hard job. And people, want the more money and prestige, so they want to get out of it and get promoted. But there's also there's been an explosion of companies that just provide SDR outsourced services, so people are just like, they look at their in-house SDR team as almost like a bench, of potential recruits for the AE. And then they outsource a portion to just companies that focus 100% on SDR work. And so, that's happening a lot out there.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Well, we want to talk about the book. So let's get into the book a little bit. Let's just start with what was your genesis for writing the book? How long did it take you? I know writing a book's never easy. I've been working on one for a while and I'm not even close. So just tell me a little bit about how you got started.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, we started doing training programs for SDR managers, and there's a couple great programs out there, and we wanted to put our own, spin on it. There's a lot of training programs out there for SDRs, and not as many for SDR managers and people running the team. So we started doing those. We'd get a WeWork in San Francisco and get some of the up and coming SDRs or SDR managers who wanted an overall framework. And we essentially took the training and broke it out into an overall framework. And then each of the chapters in the book is kind of blowing out each section of the framework and being able to double click on that. So essentially, there's kind of three audiences. There's executives who want to get an overall view of what a high performance, sales development program could look like. And then there's the managers who are actually running the team, and they're needing a guide, a framework to be able to be on track with it. And then there's the reps who want to become a manager and need to know what it looks like to run a team. So it's kind of designed for those audiences.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I've been going through and reading it, and one of the things I really love is you've got your 8 kind of core operating areas for a sales development team. And I thought it was really interesting that you started out with culture as the first one, and how do you have that defined culture for your SDR team? But you've learned a lot. You're the expert in the space. Why start with culture?
Yeah. And so, it's kind of a slant that we took on it because, just being around for a long time in the corporate world and the startup world and looking at really high performance teams in general, not necessarily sales development programs, but just high performance sales teams, marketing teams, like different specialties. There's a huge difference. And I think people, if you've been around for a while, you feel the difference when there's a high performance defined culture that's a positive culture that's the sort of the foundational benchmark for the team.
Yeah.
versus if there's no culture, there's no defined culture, and it's just sort of being defined on the fly. And sometimes you can get into a toxic, culture situation that I don't know if you've been there, but I've been there, and it sucks,
Yeah.
So we start there and we go, okay, you're either inheriting or you're starting an SDR program. What is the culture that you want to bring? And at least start with like a level set that these are going to be the tenets. This is
Yeah.
the mission statement for our team and how we're going to build it moving forward.
Awesome. Awesome. And I love you give that framework for the mission statement and everything in there. I thought it was really great. And then
Yeah.
after culture, you've got leadership as your next system and area to focus on. What's the key to being like a good SDR leader within that?
Yeah, 100%. So what we see again, people, they skip the culture component because they're just like, it's an SDR team, like whatever, just make dials and prospect and make your number. Like shut up, and make your number, type of thing. So they skip over the culture part. And then what we find a lot is because there's so much technology involved that people go straight into management, right? And you've got to be a good manager. You got to be able to set up your dashboards, hold people accountable, make sure that they're doing the activities and everything that's going to drive results. But there's not a lot of leadership involved. And so we go into, hey, what's the difference between leadership and management? And how do you define yourself as a leader? And so a couple of things is like, make your culture statement and then make sure that you're leading by example when you're running the team. And that's the main thing, because you could write down the tenets of the high performance culture and everything that you're striving toward, but the team is going to be looking at you at all times, wondering if you're actually doing it, and can you still do it? One thing that we see a lot is as soon as people get promoted from SDR to SDR manager, they're like, oh, thank God, I never have to make another cold call.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I could see that. I've never been full-time SDR or an SDR manager, but dude, I could see that,
Yeah.
Well, I've done my fair share of cold calling and not even that much. And I'm just like, man, it's not an easy thing to do, or even harder to do well. So
it never ends. And you just, I guess the point I'm trying to make is you don't want to be that ivory tower. In the book, we call it like the dashboard cowboy, where you're sitting in the back of the room or in your house, just refreshing dashboards all day and like kind of whipping people to do more stuff. You actually have to stay in the game and be running the process and demonstrating, that you can do it.
For sure. And then the next is, you got to get people on the team once you've got a leader. So hiring, I think hiring for sales in general is very challenging to figure out who's going to work and who's not. It's not as easy as like hiring a dev and be like, yeah, you got all the languages, you've got some experience, let's plug you in and see what happens. So what do you look for? Like, what advice do you have for people when hiring for this SDR role? What should people be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's a bit contrarian that is kind of a unique slant here is that we really try to emphasize hiring for the culture of the team that you're trying to put in place versus a stereotype or like there's certain stereotypes like in the sales development world that it's got to be somebody who's young, it's got to be somebody who's fresh out of college. It's got to be like blah, 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 all these things. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, those could be important attributes, there's wisdom there, but open up your viewpoint to hiring, in this position. It doesn't necessarily have to be the dogmatic, stereotypical SDR approach. Look at your culture that you're trying to create and really hire toward, that vision of a team that you're trying to put together. on the ground, and that's unique to everybody. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of our early clients, we worked a lot with their SDR team, and like I think if he wasn't a top rep, he was always close to it. Was an older guy, and older by SDR standards, most of those guys are under 30, and I think he was probably in his 40s. But man, the guy just cranked. He knew what to do, and he just made it happen. Where a lot of these guys were still figuring it out. So it makes sense. Like find someone who fits your culture, make sure they're gonna plug in. So with coaching, like training and coaching, I think kind of go hand in hand, and those were the next two big points in the book. So what do you think is the key to doing training for an SDR team? Should you be doing it every day, every week, like one-on-one? Like what do you think we should be doing for trainings?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, so understanding the difference, kind of like leadership and management. So you got training and coaching. So training is like imparting the knowledge that's out there that needs to go from your head into the team of the the SDR team, and giving context and in the old days it could be in a conference room. Now it's going to be over Zoom, but it's like we have to sit down and to your question, it's like at least for half an hour a week, like a structured sit down program where we're going to learn the context of the industry that we're calling in, or the personas and the pain points, like something that is new, and that we need to learn that new skill. Right. And so it's got to be at least once a week, on the calendar, structured training with the team, maybe more, if they're newer and stuff like that, but at least. And then with coaching, it's like, okay, here's the training, like go out and use it for the week, get beat up, take your knocks, and then we're going to go through and practice, doing role plays and bouncing it back and forth. You call me, I'll pretend to be a prospect, etc. And we're gonna like road test the stuff that you learned in the training, and that has to happen at least a few times a week, if not more. Because that's when really the rubber hits the road with the team.
Awesome. So let's go back to the kind of dashboard cowboy idea, because the next thing is analysis, and dashboard cowboy loves his charts, loves looking at the numbers, trying to dissect it from the back seat. What should we pay attention? What should an SDR manager be paying attention to? What are like the main things they're like, okay, it's going to be different for everybody because we've all got our own processes, but generally, like, what should I be looking at if I'm an SDR manager?
Yeah. And people get kind of crazy with this. So we try to really boil it down to the blocking and tackling. And so it's, and this is when all the different channels come into conversations. So a conversation where we're having either a chat, or social media, cold call, whatever that ends up being. There's some kind of a conversation happening between two people.
Okay.
Conversations to appointments set. So they call those, you can call those whatever you want, but there's an appointment set, either with the SDR and the prospect, or with the AE and the SDR and the prospect, but there's a sales appointment set, pipeline generated from those sales appointments, and then revenue generated from the pipeline. So, we go through in the big four in the book, we call them like, those are the big four basically for the team. And so first and foremost, it's like, we got to have the dashboards set up to be able to monitor, the activity inputs that are going into getting a conversation. And then we've got to be able to monitor how we're converting conversations to appointments to pipeline, and pipeline to revenue,
Yeah. As long as I think everyone's pointed towards that revenue number, you're going to stay pretty aligned. So
100%.
Okay. And then that leads us into your next, which is really results. what kind of results should we be looking for? Should we be expecting, and should we be have our as our goals, in the SDR world?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is like such a hot topic, right? Because it's interconnected to the salary a lot of the times,
Yeah.
for the SDR manager, and it's interconnected to the salary of the SDRs, right? So it's a very hot topic, and there's a lot of confusion out there, in the industry, and if you apply confusion to how people get paid, it's a recipe for disaster, right? Because people start to get pissed. So what we try to do here is we start from the end goal of what revenue are you looking for that's going to be produced by the SDR team. And what we're trying to do here is elevate, the SDR leader to not just be a passive, recipient of like, here's your quota, right?
Yeah.
We try to say, well, you need to have a conversation with, the CFO and the head of sales or the head of marketing to really determine of the, slice of the pie, how much are we responsible for in the SDR program of that revenue. And so then if you can get that revenue number far enough out, you can start to reverse engineer what your quota should actually be. And so you can look at the revenue number, reverse it back to pipeline from the team, reverse it back to appointment set, and then you can understand how many conversations we're supposed to be having, and we can drive toward that number. And then, it all makes sense to everybody in a perfect world, why we're training, why we're coaching, why we're trying to get to that, because, it's aligned versus just this mysterious, quota that comes out of an office somewhere.
Yeah. No, that if people can, I think you're spot on. If people can understand that this is, the reasoning behind it rather than here's our quota, like just hit it, they can understand, okay, like there is some math and logic behind this, and it's easier to work towards that when you're not getting close to hitting your quota, because that happens. It's easy for an AE and SDR to kind of be like, you know what, this quota is never going to happen. I am going to move on and find something else to do.
Yeah.
Don't understand where it's coming from and how they're expected to achieve that. So
exactly. And just real quick on that, with in the results section, it's like, if you've got some good analysis set up, at least those big four, and there's some red flags, you're not getting enough conversations, you're not, driving enough pipeline, etc. You start to see those red flags, then, okay, I have some data now, our results in these areas are not good. Let's reverse it back to, let's look at our coaching, let's look at our training, let's look at our hiring. You know what I mean? Now we have something to work for, versus, in the sales development world, there's a lot of finger pointing, right? Because it sits in between sales and marketing and operations, and it's at this intersection. So instead of finger pointing, let's reverse engineer why we're not achieving the results that we need from this, and fix some of these problems.
For sure. And then the last, but definitely not least, reputation, which I thought was really interesting to end on. So give me your thoughts on why reputation is important.
Yeah, so this is kind of the world that we live in today of hey, if you're not tooting your own horn to some extent and getting out there and branding yourself, then you might be left behind, or you might not have as many opportunities. And there's a couple things. One is that being a great SDR leader right now is super valuable, because not that many people know how to do it. I mean, if you think about our conversation today, this is freaking complicated, and there's not a lot of people that can produce great results quarter after quarter. So you got to understand your value in the marketplace, and you also got to think about, you could get to a certain level of SDR leadership, and then what's next? You've got to think about, do I want, in a few years to run a sales organization? Do I want to run a marketing organization? Do I want to become an AE? Like, how do you position yourself in the market to be ready for those next opportunities, and maximize the opportunity that's there for you with pursuing this? So we go into that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more on like, hey, you can get a lot of places by being good as an SDR, either manager or individual, because as long as you're helping a business close more business and increase revenue, like I feel like there's always a spot for somebody like that. And you're going to have options and doors open to you. So awesome, David. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that I asked you about the book that I've missed out on?
Well, I mean, it's maybe just motivation to read the book is that I wrote I saw a thing come across my desk yesterday, a company hiring a director of global sales development at a publicly traded company. So it's a big deal. 300K per year, plus, all the perks and benefits.
Yeah.
Right. So next time somebody tells you, sales development, it's dead end, whatever, entry level, just tell them, hey, 300K.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good money.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to solve a few problems. Right. So that's why I say, like, this is a purple squirrel. They used to call it like a purple squirrel, dude. If you're good at this, you can kind of write your own ticket. So
for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you, being interested and talking about this, because it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Dude, thank you so much for being on. And if people want to reach out, first off, where can they find the book?
Yeah, I would just head over to tenbound.com, tenbound.com. Tons of, free resources, and you can buy it right there.
Cool. And then if anyone wants to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, just hit me up on Tenbound, or definitely connect on LinkedIn. It's Dulany. So it's spelled a little funny, but I'm on LinkedIn all day. So let's definitely connect.
Okay, David, thanks so much, and we'll chat later.
Thanks a lot.